Welcome to the Connect to Marriage podcast by Focus on the Family Singapore. Married life can be filled with twists and turns, so join us as we figure it out together.
Hello and welcome to Connect to Marriage podcast. I'm Gary.
And I'm Jo.
And we are your hosts for this episode.
In each episode of the Connect to podcast, we'll be taking questions that couples ask about sex and intimacy, communication and conflict, and so much more. We hope you'll keep tuning in to learn with us as you grow closer, deeper, and stronger in your marriage.
Today's content is intended for a mature audience, so listener discretion is advised. You might want to direct the attention of your young children elsewhere. I think my wife's sex drive leaves much to be desired. When I think it's time for intimacy, she typically responds that she's too busy or tired.
Well, at least I don't complain of headaches. My husband complains that he wishes I would say to him more often, "I want you," and to say it in a sexually provocative way.
Maybe you don't have to say "I want you," all you have to say is "I desire you." The women even desire sex. How important is the sex drive?
Well, after 22 years of marriage, I hope we can say that between us, Gary, you and me, we are more attuned to each other's desires for intimacy.
Definitely.
And of course, we learn a lot about intimacy also through our work as marriage solemnizers, family life trainers, and as a relationship coach and couple mentors. When sex is understood as not just a physical act, but in the larger context of intimacy in marriage, I think both men and women, not just men, desire it equally, though perhaps not similarly.
And that's where I think every couple listening in needs to remember we are very different. And we've been addressing that for the past few episodes, that we are different when we approach the whole topic of sex. We have different preferences, different inclinations, and today's topic, we're going to be just addressing some of the differences in sexuality.
And I think it's good to understand why we call this series Intimacy Matters and not just Sex Matters, because intimacy is far greater than the act of sex or the physical sexual intercourse itself. And if we really understand that sex in its holistic meaning, it's always desirable, not just for the men, but also for all wives out there.
So what does sexual intimacy look like for men versus women?
And how do husbands and wives express sexual desire? That's something I think I have learned after 20 years. Maybe it took me a long time to learn this. But really, men and women are wired differently for sex, just simply because our bodies are different. I remember that when I was always wondering, why is it my husband can be just turned on at any instant? We could be having a crisis. In fact, I think on one occasion, he wasn't feeling very well. He was feeling down. When I thought the only other way I could think of to make him feel better is to perhaps offer him some sexual intimacy, and suddenly he came alive.
I think that's the power of the men. In the sexual response, it's the quick initiation that men have. Sometimes we say men are like microwave, ting, in a flash, can get excited and sexually aroused. Women, on the other hand, or at least what I've discovered, they have a different wiring, and it's not like a microwave. They're often described like they're crock pots. It takes a long time to simmer, to let the emotions develop. So the response time for the man and woman definitely is very different.
And I think that also leads to talk about climaxing in sex. That for men, it can happen really quickly, but it's also a very short, a very intense experience. But for women, it takes longer. But when a woman experiences that sexual climax, to her, it's a more in-depth experience that encompasses not just the body, but the mind, the soul, the spirit, everything, all rolled into one.
So just like our sexual response and sexual climax is different, we have different things that stimulate each other as well. Very often for the men, it's body-centered. It means the physical appearance, the physical nature of the other person is very important in stimulating the man.
In many ways, they are more visual, right? Whereas women, we are more centered on the whole person, not just what we see. And I thought this was funny because there's this quote that says, the reason the average woman would rather have beauty than brains is because she knows that the average man can see better than he can think. Perhaps on the downside of things, this could be why men experience more problems with pornography than women, because they're just more visually stimulated and of course more body-centered when it comes to sexual stimulation. But it also explains why for women being more person-centered, for us, physical and emotional intimacy must go hand in hand.
So rather than see it like you're so different from me, just understand that, okay, we are different. And if I want to pleasure my wife, if I want to help and honor my wife and serve my wife, I need to fulfill her needs in the way that she will feel most cared for, so that she will desire sexual relationship with me or sexual intimacy with me. Rather than just, I'm wired this way, you should be the same as me. I need to approach it very differently. She's very different from me. She's not going to be the same as me as long as we live. And I just need to realize that, okay, that's how I can create an atmosphere or place where she will desire me as well.
A lifetime of love and romance requires intentional effort and attention. Yet in times of busyness and with overwhelming priorities to tend to, our marriages can often take a back seat. No matter the state of your relationship today, we want to help you and your spouse thrive. Check out Connect 2, featuring specially created experiences and resources, our favorite selection of articles, top hits on our podcast, date ideas, conversation starters, and more to address the issues that are keeping you and your spouse apart, and to help you rekindle the joy of pursuing one another. Visit www.family.org.sg/connect2 today.
We talked about the three aspects of love in an earlier episode, and so for fulfilling sex to occur, there needs to be really a connection in heart, in mind, and also in body, and especially for women. I've always found that it's quite difficult when I have many things going on in my life. I get off work, I'm rushing to mind the kid, take care of things in the household, even see to extended family demands or obligations, and then to actually be able to unwind, not just for myself emotionally, mentally, but together with my husband, to feel that, oh, I'm now connected with him emotionally. I've been able to offload the stress that I have had throughout the day. He's hearing me, I'm being understood, and because we are connecting, I find that it's easier when we get into bed.
That's why it's very different. So husbands, if you're listening in, remember, first of all, your wife will take a long time. So if you decide to have sexual intimacy with her on the Saturday, you better start from the Monday, preparing the atmosphere, taking care of all the things that need to be taken care of. And remember, we said you can just be turned on very quickly, but for the wife, very often they need a long time for the emotions to be settled, peace of mind, children settled, all the other affairs in the house are all done. And then that's when she's ready for any kind of physical intimacy and touch.
Of course, there will be some women who are a little bit faster than most, but I think the important point is that regardless of who is the sexual microwave or slow cooker in our marriage, we both need to learn to simmer together, to move together from the very cold to the very hot when it comes to sexual intimacy. And for women, it's really important that we always deal with the talk before we touch.
So husbands, remember this. Intimacy is spelled T-A-L-K to the women. It's about talking, communicating. While intimacy is spelled S-E-X to the men. We are wired very differently. But if you can learn to communicate, learn to connect with her heart, I think she's more inclined, she'll desire more to have sexual intimacy with you.
So as usual, in each podcast, we address a frequently asked question that couples have about marriage. And today's question is, I want to meet my husband's desire for sex, but I'm just too tired. He comes home, puts his feet up, grunts over dinner, then with a knowing glint in his eye, expects me to get the kids out of the way and meet him in the bedroom. Oh, I can totally resonate and empathize with this. And Gary, to your credit, I'm so glad that this is not us anymore.
It was in the early stages where I expected things to happen. A lot of it is because I didn't quite understand. Initially, I would feel like, why am I rejected? Doesn't my wife care for me? Doesn't she think about me? Because I am thinking about this. I am thinking of sex with my wife, but how come she's not thinking? I took it as she was not interested in me, rather than realizing that she was interested in me, but there were so many things, and for her to really be in the mood, all the other things that were important in her life needed to be addressed and settled.
Husbands, if you're listening in, if you want a good night, start in the morning. That's why they say sex begins in the kitchen, or rather with the heart, maybe with the stomach. In any case, remember, women spell intimacy with a T. That's TALK, and maybe even TIME. We do need the talk before touch. We do need the time from our husbands to allow our hearts to be settled. And in fact, if you touch our soul, you touch our body, right? If you arouse the heart, you will arouse our body.
So what does that mean practically for the husbands who might think, so long, so much time needed just to have sexual intimacy? Yes, remember, it's about sacrificing in sickness and in health, good times and bad times. If you want your wife, it's about placing the value that she is important, how she feels is important for you in the relationship. Then we need to make effort to do those things.
But wives, I do have to caution and remind us that it's actually a good thing if your husband continues to desire you sexually. So don't just shrug it off as a nuisance, right? It takes effort. With some advanced planning, some cooperation from your husband, it really is possible to carve out time despite our multiple demands, our very busy schedule, to make sure that we always have mind space for sexual intimacy. Okay, so remember, there's no wife can resist going to bed and early with a thoughtful and selfless husband.
So lesson to learn, be thoughtful, be selfless. What happens above the sheets or outside the bedroom determines what happens under the sheets in the bedroom. Yeah, if there's constant criticism and judgment, it's going to be brought into the whole relationship. And when you're having sexual intimacy, that voice is just going to be there judging you, feeling like you're being critical about everything that's going on there as well.
That's a real turn-off. But remember this, husbands and wives, we are on the same team. So rather than fight your husband's sexual desires in this case, work together on the same team to address both of your sexual needs. At the end of the day, we need to use sex to cherish our spouse and not use our spouse to cherish sex.
Focus on your spouse's sexual pleasure and well-being. Yeah, because sexual desires are good when directed towards our spouse and in a loving manner that is other-centered and not selfish.
So today's couple challenge, if you're listening to this with your spouse,
take an extra 5 minutes at the end of this episode to share with each other one thing about your spouse. For example, something your spouse does that makes him or her sexually desirable to you.
Ooh, interesting one. Well, if you're looking to reinvigorate your marriage, apart from that conversation, quite an important conversation that you have after this, do check out our upcoming Best Date Ever event for couples on the 20th and 21st of August at family.org.sg/bestdateever.
For more marriage resources, you can visit our website or blog at www.family.org.sg/blog.
Again, don't hesitate to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for helpful family life resources. And if you have a question such as today's on marriage, you can always message us on social media. So thank you for tuning in. Do follow and subscribe to the Connect 2 podcast. And until next time, have a great week with your spouse.